One of the first games that I played when I built my first PC back in 2019 was The Outer Worlds. I'd finally saved up enough money working at my corpo job, and while I'd played it on console beforehand, that PC experience was something special. So when it was announced that they were going to be working on a sequel, I was all for it. While it did take some time to get here, 6 years and one of the funniest announcement trailers later, we finally arrived at the release of The Outer Worlds 2. Once again developed by Obsidian Entertainment, who have been busy as hell this year with the release of Avowed back in February, Grounded 2 launching in early access in July, and now The Outer Worlds 2 at the tail end of October. 3 games in 1 year is absolutely nuts. While The Outer Worlds 2 is the second game in the franchise, you don't necessarily need to have played the first one in order to understand what's going on here in this game. There are some references, there's some callbacks, but nothing major that's going to make you feel too left out at times. The combat this go around has seen a major improvement over the first game, with a much wider selection of tools and weapons at your disposal. But where I think this game truly shines the most is within its writing, build crafting, and dialogue choices. If you want to be a goody two-shoes kind of guy, you can. If you want to literally take everyone out in the game, you can. If you want to tell your companions to kick rocks and leave your team, you can, because the choice is yours, and it's easily one of my favorite aspects of this RPG. The Outer Worlds 2 on the surface can seem like a very simple and small RPG, and clocking in at just over 46 hours, I think I was very happy with that length, and after a blitzkrieg of titles that we just went through the last couple of months, it was really nice to have a lot smaller of a game to dive into. I've heard you can definitely cut that down significantly by a large margin if you just beeline through all that, but I got to experience all of the companion quest, a majority of the faction quest, along with a handful of side missions, and walked away thoroughly impressed with my experience. It didn't ever feel like it overstayed its welcome, and I thought that was great. While there are some small issues I have, like difficulty tuning and crafting UI, I don't think those really ruined my overall enjoyment. And while the sequel here might not be as transformative or genre defining as some would have hoped, in a lot of ways The Outer Worlds 2 is, simply put, a bigger and better version of the first game in nearly every way.
Force rockets. Force rockets. Put a rocket in your pocket and launch your launch today.
As I do with all my reviews, I like to talk a little bit about my experience performance-wise with the game. So I went ahead and I played The Outer Worlds 2 through the Game Pass app on PC, running it on an RTX 4080 and an i7-13700K with all the settings at their highest values, DLSS set to balanced, and frame generation enabled. I will note that I tried running ray tracing, but the instability that it caused was just really not worth the headache, so I decided to turn that off for the duration of my playthrough. Across my 46 hours of playtime, not once did I run into a single crash, and I was easily able to maintain a solid 144 FPS average, and that shouldn't really be a shock because The Outer Worlds 2, like Avowed, isn't trying to go for some hyper realistic looking game, but rather a very distinct looking art style, and they managed to nail that once again. This is clearly evident when you walk into one of the game's many towns, because you can see that reflected at nearly every turn. You're constantly bombarded by advertisements, drones, someone trying to sell you the next big thing. Hell, even the in-game radio is comprised of songs that are trying to sell you products within that game world.
Our medical experts recommend you buy a bunch and puff right in.
And it really just puts you within that headspace of that corporatized space frontier. So it's not something that's going to knock your socks off or blow you away with its insane visuals, but I do think the art style does a lot of the heavy lifting across many of the planets and locations that you'll travel to. And I do think the more that you play it, the more and more that you'll come to appreciate the look of it, and hey, you can play it in third person now, so that's a plus. Short block performance wise, the game ran great for me. I have heard of a few people running into issues with ghosting, some unstable performance here and there, but I always do recommend that if you are considering picking the game up for yourself, it is best to look at a few videos with comparable specs so you at least have an idea of what you'll be working with. The narrative of The Outer Worlds 2 is pretty simple. You're an Earth Directory agent sent to the station of Horizon Point in order to investigate anomalous rift activities, and obviously I'm omitting some facts here just due to spoilers, but that opening section is pretty lengthy and does a good job at introducing you to a lot of the key elements of the game, your build, and the different avenues that you can take it. But soon after that intro, you'll be given your ship and then tasked going across the Arcadia galaxy and its curated list of planetary zones. Just like that first game, you're going to have these zones on the planets that you're going to be able to explore, they aren't really like these fully expansive, massive open worlds, more so these open zones that each have their own distinct look and feel to them. You've got your tropical island at the start, followed by the more desert and snowy locations in the latter half of the game. And while I appreciate the variety in the open worlds, I do wish that they would have been a little bit larger in scope. As the farther in the game you get, the locations do start to feel very linear. The world of the Outer Worlds 2 is one that's been consumed by capitalism and greed. Nearly every square inch of this universe is being used for some type of marketing or advertisement ploy, with characters dropping ad reads in the middle of literally bleeding out right in front of you. It also explores the morality of these larger companies and the people within them and the lengths that they'll go in order to maintain those profit margins. And back when I played the first game, I was about 3 months into that first adult job that I had, and I thought all the references, jokes about the underappreciated workers or big corporations were kind of funny, haha, I can laugh at them, but 6 years later and being on the other side of a layoff and unemployment, the sequel hit me in a way that I really wasn't expecting it to. When I'd hear about workers getting sacked after record high performances, being forced to work extra hours without any additional compensation, which happens to mirror how Microsoft and other large corporations have been conducting layoffs this year, even after record profits. So while they aren't exactly apples to my situation, I was still able to relate to a lot of those people that you'd happen across in the story, and I suspect many others will as well. Where that story takes you is really up to you. There's obviously an A and a B plot, but how you get there is entirely up to you. When you arrive at that first location of Paradise Island, you're going to have a few intro quests and things that'll kind of set you in motion, but early on you're going to be given a choice to side with 2 people, and this is just one of the many choices that you'll be tasked with making at nearly every turn. Because in the Outer Worlds 2, you are going to be making choices and decisions that can and will affect the outcome of your companions, your alliances, and quests within the game world. Maybe a little piece of info that you found during a side quest at the 10-hour mark comes back to help you around at the 40-hour mark in the end game. It's not something that I really could have predicted, but the fact that this game has that much depth narratively, I think goes a long way, at least with my enjoyment that I had with it personally, and could go a long way in subsequent replays. Some might be turned off by the amount of dialogue and the amount of talking in this game, but come on, it's an Obsidian game, it rewards investigation and curiosity, and if you just want to start blasting, you can, because that's an option. And admittedly, some will say that the choices and the narratives aren't that compelling, but I think that's the fun part about the role playing and just the story aspect of this game, because there's really no right or wrong way to play it. Yeah, there's essentially what I would like to call a good or an evil way to go about things, but very rarely are you going to be boxed into a certain situation that only has one way to go about completing an objective, and most of the time you're able to suss out a way or two as long as you've spec'd into the right skills or perks. Just like any other RPG, your character in the Outer Worlds 2 is going to be built out from a subset of skills and perks for you to choose from. So when you first create that character, you're going to choose from a selection of base perks, character, and then background traits. These character and background traits are going to unlock certain dialogue options or allow you to do certain actions within that game world that are specific to that trait. Me, I chose the gambler trait, allowing me to have some more risky dialogue options that sometimes paid off and sometimes didn't. Then I had the ability to test my luck out with traps and other tasks out in the open world. On the surface, this might seem like a small little choice, but the way that one of these simple background traits can completely change how a quest ends up is something that I absolutely was not expecting to be as prevalent as it was, and more often than not, you are going to be given opportunities to flex all those different perks and traits. Picking your skills and how you want to build out your character is also very important, because as far as I know, there isn't any way to reset your perks like you could in that first game, so when you're making your choice on that way to level 30, you really want to be certain, because when you lock those in, they're locked in for good. Perks are also another big component to your build, as they're unlocked every 2 levels, and these are usually going to be things that alter up your gameplay in much more significant ways, like the ability to hack drones, allowing for an additional weapon holster, and then for me personally, anything that involved a dialogue skill tree option. With my character, I went for that Han Solo smooth talking gunslinger build, and I loved that role-playing feel that I got out of the game as it progressed at nearly every turn, because I was using my suave, my gambler dialogue options, plus I really wanted to lean more into that role and that build that I was crafting. There is, however, one part of the build process that I'm really at a crossroads with. On one hand, the weapons and the tools that you get are really damn cool, as I felt the first game was very limiting in the number of options that you had. So for instance, in the sequel, you have this disintegrator tool, which basically allows you to melt bodies on the spot, making it a little bit easier to go stealthily about encounters. Or do you use the N-ray vision to look through walls to see where that next patrol is? In the sequel, it felt like nearly every planet that I went to had some type of new weapon for me to find or legendary for me to discover. While they might not have all been, something that worked out for my build, I still appreciated the sheer number and then just the pure wackiness of all those different weapons that I found. Armor, on the other hand, is usually a miss, because there are a lot of cool, just sick looking outfits that you would find, but then you would look at the perks and that was really the big thing that would then turn me off from wearing them. There was this really dope looking armor that I had with like these flaps. It looked really cool, but then the perk is every time you get shot, you lose money. Who the hell wants to wear that? Or another where it lets me revive myself if I die in combat for a small fee, but with how many trauma kits I had, there's really no reason for that. So while the outfits most of the time are going to be really cool, they're very niche and very specific, and if you find the right one, it could be that missing component for your build that you're looking for. You would also think that modding would significantly change the game here, since weapons and armor no longer are able to be leveled up like they could in the first game at the workbench, but sadly the modding in this game just doesn't feel that impactful or necessary at times. You could add different attachments, modifications, or buffs, but it didn't ever feel like you needed to, so long as you put enough perks and points into those right skill trees. Flaws are also present here in the sequel, making a return from the first game. Flaws in the Outer Worlds 2 are perks that have a negative effect or component to them. So for instance, if you bought the premium edition of the Outer Worlds 2, you get a flaw called consumerism, which is basically making fun of you for buying the most expensive version of the game. While it does give you a discount on buying items from vendors, it also makes the amount that you get from selling to the vendors less. So over the course, these are going to trigger based off your gameplay tendencies. There was one that I got for skipping some dialogue in a cutscene, and had I accepted it, it would then choose the dialogue options for me after a few seconds, and you aren't exactly forced to choose any of these, but they do help shake up the flow of the game while still giving you some nice bonuses here and there. Just be warned though, once you accept a flaw, you can't get rid of it. The same can't be said about your companions here in the Outer Worlds 2. While the companions in the first game were okay, Parvati was the only one that really stuck out in my eyes, and the only one that I really see most people talk about nowadays. Here in the sequel, Obsidian I think did a much better job at weaving those companions as natural parts of that narrative this time around. Niles being one of my favorite people to roll around with, you meet him early on as you are both Earth Directorate agents and have a much more personal stake in the story than the rest of the crew. Marisol is the other companion I had with me most of the time, as she was this cold and calculated scientist that was feared amongst her patrons within the Order, and that status bailed us out of a few sticky situations more than a couple of times.
Marisol Delgado, former head intercessor, Department of Preemptive Causal Redirection.
The endpoint. No. The improbability of you interrupting my plans at this singular moment beggars belief.
Little things like choosing to take a certain companion with you on a mission can in fact affect how that mission ends up playing out, or if you try to take a rival companion into an enemy base, they might have second thoughts about letting you in, and then you have to talk them down in order to avoid hostility. All of these things, as I learned them, help influence my choice, because I was constantly thinking if I should take this person with me in fear of how another companion might act. For instance, early on, Niles was pretty upset that I didn't take him on a pretty critical mission, and afterwards, had I not talked him down, he was actually planning on leaving the team altogether. Little things like that helped add a lot of depth to the companions, because it forced you to look at them like people with actual feelings rather than just these empty NPCs. Each companion, just like that first game, is also going to have a side quest chain that spans multiple parts and missions, sometimes across multiple planets. They eventually will culminate in you getting some better gear, learning a little bit more about that character's backstory, and then a fancy looking new set of armor to boot. A majority of the companion side quests I thought were enjoyable, but I say that as a couple of them, I did find them to be pretty cliche and samey. I'd say that's not necessarily a bad thing, I just didn't find their narratives to be compelling as some of the others. The companions also this time around aren't really going to like blow you away, and sadly there isn't much in terms of depth when it comes to leveling them up. You choose basically one of two skills as you level up, as their level is dependent on yours, with unlocks appearing every 5 levels. And you you can really only command them in combat with a singular button press, which I would have liked to see a little bit more depth on. Hell, I wasn't the biggest fan of Dragon Age the Veilguard, but at least those companions had some depth when it came to the combat. And lastly, one of my favorite aspects about the companions here is that if you aren't vibing with a particular person in your crew, you don't just have to leave them on the ship. You can basically tell them to fuck off entirely and just leave your group. So while the companions might not be brimming with tons of depth as say something like Baldur's Gate 3, I still think they were definitely a step up in terms of likability from that first game and Obsidian's more recent game Avowed, but I still do think there is a lot more room for improvement moving forward into the future.
You're still a cog in the sovereign's plan. Give me your hand. We serve the protectorate however we can.
As we begin to wrap things up here, if you were to ask me if I think The Outer Worlds 2 is worth $70, I would ask you if you're a fan of that first game and you want more of it, then the answer is yes. But if you're someone that didn't quite vibe with the first game or maybe is a little tight on cash, I don't think this is really going to change your mind. It's the first game, but it's a bigger version of it with some quality of life improvements and upgraded visuals. So waiting for a sale or playing it through Game Pass might be the way to go. The structure and the framework of that first title is the foundation for which that sequel was built upon, and that might upset or disappoint others who are looking for that next big evolution or change within the RPG franchise. As many people will note, Obsidian are the same studio that developed Fallout New Vegas, which is heralded by many as not just the pinnacle of the Fallout franchise, but the pinnacle of the open world RPG franchise as a whole. So no, this isn't New Vegas in space like many are wanting it to be. It definitely does give off some heavy Fallout vibes when you have that radio playing and you're roaming around one of the different planets, but I try to appreciate a game for what it is rather than what it isn't. Personally, I walked away very happy with my time spent here in The Outer Worlds 2. I got a solid 46-hour experience out of the game, and while I suspect you can definitely cut that down, I wanted to get that full experience in this corporate hellscape. I just wish that maybe there could have been a little bit more depth in some of the factions, as they did feel pretty bare bones. The crafting and the upgrading I think could have used some work and maybe feel a little bit more impactful and more in depth, and then also just a little bit more depth when it comes to controlling and customizing your companions. But the different perks, the different dialogue options, the different ways that you can go about building your character, I think are easily some of my favorite aspects of this game. The way you're able to roleplay as this Han Solo gunslinger, or if you just want to be an evil psychopath, the game is going to let you do that and not really have that much limiting factors to it. I've heard people call this a safe or obligatory sequel, and I kind of get those arguments, but personally, I wasn't really looking for anything major or transformative. Obsidian took what worked in the first game and expanded on those ideas. Instead of trying to go about creating tons of new gimmicks and gameplay mechanics, they instead honed in on the dialogue, the writing, and then refined that combat. While I don't think it's a perfect game, it's one that I still had a ton of fun with. In any other year, this would have easily made my top 5 list, but with how stacked the last year of gaming has been, I don't know if it's going to make the cut this year. But I'll be sure to check back later on next year when those 2-story DLC packs drop, and maybe Obsidian, now that they have their schedule freed up, can start working on that New Vegas sequel. If you did enjoy yourself here today, consider dropping the video a like, subscribing, and hitting that notification bell so you can catch all of my upcoming reviews and previews in the future. Now that we're on the other side of the review season, I've been diving into Arc Raiders a little bit, and that game has been an absolute blast. Not going to commit to doing a review right here, right now, but it is a possibility. Then we've got that yearly release of Call of Duty Black Ops, what is it, 27 now? Which I'm admittedly not that excited for at the moment. It could change by the time launch rolls around, but there also might be a few other titles that I'm able to slide in throughout the rest of the year. So if any of those interest you at all, stick around. I'd love to have you here on the channel. And as always, if you did make it this far, I just want to say thank you for taking that time out of your day. And this has been my review for The Outer Worlds 2. Thank you for watching.